Hello there, and welcome to the next episode of Limitless, the podcast that makes the impossible possible. I'm Alex O'Neill, and today we're going to look at how to understand your thought patterns so that you can more quickly overcome life's setbacks and frustrations. The downsides of positive thinking. As a self-proclaimed optimist, this may seem like an odd title for a podcast episode. However, a conversation with my husband the other day got me thinking about this, and ironically, how much of a downward spiral positive thinking can get you into. The positive thinking movement in psychology came about over 20 years ago. Psychologists realised that instead of focusing on what was wrong in people's lives and trying to fix it, they could instead help their patients see what was good in their lives, and suddenly mental ailments started to go away by themselves. This was a great step forward and made a huge difference to the way people talked about the brain and mood. However, what people define as positive thinking can, in my opinion, cause an opposite reaction. Very specifically, positive thinking should not be seen as something you do, more like something that your brain learns over time. This may seem like a subtle difference, but for me, the difference is incredibly important. One way opens up a potential downward spiral, and the other is training your brain in a new way of thinking. When you focus on how you must think positively, or on replacing each negative thought with a positive one, it may on the surface seem like a great idea. Every time you get stuck in traffic, for instance, just think about how great it is to be spending some extra time listening to your favourite podcast. When you have an argument with a family member, at least they are clearing the air and you understand what is bothering them. The downside of this is it takes a lot of work in a moment when our brains do not want to make the effort to give us positive thoughts. I can tell you now to come up with an alternative positive thought for next time you're stuck in traffic and late for work, but I can also tell you that in that moment when you are hot, raging and worried about being late, that positive thought is probably going to be pretty hard to conjure up. And this leads to the downward spiral. You won't necessarily be able to make yourself think positively in that moment, which may then lead you to get annoyed that you can't think positively. Maybe it's only you who can't do this and that you're a failure even at being happy, and why is it that everyone else can do this and you can't? And now we have a whole heap of guilt and frustration about not thinking positive piled on top of the original anger and worry about being late. This can happen with any positive habit. Think about the last time you said you were going to eat healthily or give up a particular food or drink. You probably did okay for a few days or even weeks. Then one evening you were like, sod it, let's get a pizza. And then a pizza turns into chocolate ice cream and wine, and suddenly your healthy food kick is over and you give up with the thought of, I just can't eat well. And then, I imagine, you beat yourself up for your inadequacies and figure you'll probably be unhealthy forever. So, if you're in a negative thought spiral, how do you get yourself out of it? How do you become more optimistic over time? Well, I believe you can, but it certainly isn't by telling yourself off for not achieving it. That is literally the opposite of a positive thought. The key, as you might imagine, and you may have worked out by now if you've listened to my podcast episode so far, is understanding the brain. Firstly, as I've mentioned in other episodes, our brains strengthen any thought pattern or firing of neurons that occurs together frequently. So, as an example, let's say you're quite good at cooking. Every time you cook a meal and eat it, and it tastes great, or your family or friends congratulate you on another delicious dish, the thought pattern in your brain that says, I'm good at cooking, fires and gets stronger. This happens with negative stuff too. If you think, for instance, you're not good at playing badminton, Every time you mess up or someone else plays better than you, this negative thought is reiterated in your brain. Your brain is actually even more complex than this. It is a prediction engine, which means it likes to foresee things before they happen, to speed up brain processing. This means that if you have had a thought pattern before in a given situation, the brain will predict that you will have it again. I.e., when you're in the kitchen, you are imagining that you are good at cooking before you even pick up a knife. Or you are ready to be bad at badminton before you step on the court. Now, here's the thing. If your brain is predicting something, it is much more likely to become true. If you think you're a good cook, you're more likely to cook really well. And if you think you're not very good at badminton, you're more likely to mess up and play badly. Why does our brain do this? Well, there are two things at play here. First, your brain is always looking for shortcuts. So when you believe you're good at cooking, it picks out all the stuff that you believe makes you a good cook and tries to replicate those. It makes an effort to pick the best ingredients. It pulls out the chopping skill and dices quickly and evenly. It heightens your senses so you can see and smell when something is cooked perfectly. Essentially, it creates focus on the areas that make you good. In the negative scenario, although it seems to defy logic, because your brain thinks you are bad at badminton, it will literally seek out the shortcuts to being bad. Oh, I'm bad at badminton. Okay, let's shortcut all the ways I have missed shots or hit out of the court in the past. This may make you feel frustrated, and you may be wondering, why wouldn't my brain pull out the bits I'm good at if I want to be better at badminton? But let's actually dig into what your brain is thinking here. Is it thinking, I want to get better at badminton? Or is it thinking, I'm annoyed because I'm bad at badminton? Can you see that one of these is focused on a negative state, i.e., I'm not very good, whereas the other is focused on learning, I want to get better? And this leads us on to the second thing. As well as finding shortcuts and patterns that match our thinking, our brain uses something called the Reticular Activating System, or RAS, which is the system that distributes the inputs from our external environment into our brain. Because our environments often have so much going on, it filters out a lot of stuff and only allows through what you want to pay attention to. For instance, when you're cooking, there might be the noise of the TV on in the other room, it's raining outside and you have some green plants on your windowsill, but you'll tune all of those out while you focus on cooking because they aren't useful to you. The things your RAS will focus on will be the smell of your cooking meal, or the brightness of the ingredients you select out of the fridge, or the precision with which you are moving the knife as you chop. The brain is focusing in on these things and filtering out the rest, so you end up being better at what you're doing. When you think you're bad at something, your RAS will literally focus in on the things that make you bad and notice them time and time again. This is where the Henry Ford phrase, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, comes from. When you activate your RAS for things you can't do, your brain and body will respond in the way that you're expecting. Now, let's get back to the badminton example of different thought patterns for a sec. If your thinking is, I can't play badminton, your brain will notice all the times when you messed up and couldn't play, and thus reinforce the thought for you. However, if your thinking is, I want to get better at badminton, the crazy thing is that your actual playing might be no different, but your brain will notice all the things that are going to help you get better instead. All the times when you nearly got a hit, and could have got it if you'd reached just a little further, or when you would have been able to jump in the right direction if your foot was in the right place. You might even be soaking up the moves of other players as your brain is in learning mode, and you'll come away from that game thinking that you're getting better rather than that you're no good. So how does all this tie into positive thinking? As I said earlier, you can't force positive thoughts in place of negative ones. In fact, it may be detrimental to where you're trying to get to. However, understanding the brain, and the RAS in particular, will start us down the path of curiosity. What might it look like to be positive in this situation? I wonder if I could learn to play better. Knowing that there is a chance of seeing things in a different way means we not only will be more likely to see things positively, but our brain will literally start firing the neurons that will help us get there. When we start to believe in the possibility of change for us, which we have seen is possible and true for all brains, it opens up those new neural pathways for us to learn how to think in a different way in a given situation. So, for today, here is your challenge. Firstly, spend 5 minutes doing something you love and that makes you feel good. Go for a walk, play some uplifting music, or cuddle with a partner. It just makes this next bit easier. Now, think of a situation in which you want to behave differently. It might be a time when you feel a particular negative emotion, such as being stuck in traffic, or a particular skill or situation which you feel you aren't very good at, like playing badminton. Make sure you're not in that situation right now, though, otherwise it will be much harder to do. Write down lots of ways in which this situation could be made better. When you're stuck in the car, could you play your favourite music? Or use the time to prepare and plan your day ahead, or ring your mum who you've been meaning to get in contact with. If you're not good at badminton, could you think about ways you could learn to get better? Watch videos, watch other players, try a new move. If you struggle to come up with these ideas for yourself, think about what you would advise a friend to do if they were in the same situation. You could literally take this list with you to refer to when you next know you're going to be in that situation, and that would be a great reminder for when your old thinking and behaviour patterns set in. But even this act right now of thinking about ways your situation could be different will start your brain's RAS filtering in new ways. Breaking that old habitual way of thinking will open you up to a whole new realm of possibilities and optimism. Thanks for listening to this episode of Limitless, the podcast that is making the impossible possible. I'm Alex O'Neill, and as ever, I'd be really interested to hear what you think of this episode. So, come and find me at www.patreon.com/limitless community, and then send me a message, or if you'd like to join the community, I've got some great little extra snippets of content for you. See you in the next episode.